Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Lost One for All to Fate Itself? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Have other people ever looked into the mirror and not recognized themselves? It was your first day of school, and as you stared into yourself, you couldn't find one last atom you knew as your own. The hair, the eyes, a face lined with sorrow and weariness. It wasn't yours. That wasn't what you were supposed to look like. But what were you supposed to look like? You gripped the bathroom counter. The quartz was cold and dug into your hands. You stared long and hard into your eyes. They were like black holes, depths you couldn't find the bottom of, and in your head, there were maggots and rats which ate away at your brain. Memories, memories, memories you couldn't find, couldn't understand, couldn't find the end of. So many memories yet never enough. You stared at the compression sleeves on your arms. They were black and ran from your wrists to your elbows, but your arms still felt bare and naked. It wasn't enough. Nothing you did was ever enough. Buildings collapsed in the distance, fires raged, ash rained like snow, and there were shrill screams of ambulances and dying people which all blurred into the same barking, blaring sound of death. All around you, you could feel with your quirk the stop of hearts, of breath. The cold of quartz which bit into your hand was like the cold of the dying corpses, the heat leaving their no longer breathing bodies. You saw Mama and Papa, the way that they grasped at their throats, the way they squirmed, the way their lips turned blue, and the way your other Papa laughed. You saw the bright lights, and the doctors with their white masks and white coats and strange goggles, and you heard the shrill scream of drills and saws and other tools they would use to take you apart atom by atom and put you back together. Looking deep into your bottomless eyes, you wondered, who am I? What was I before? Not enough. Not enough. Not enough. The depth of your eyes, the depths of screams, the depths of bodies and blood, and where was the end to it? The bad place, was it real? The dead were left to fade with memories only you possessed, so how was it not simply a daydream if only your head was left to hold rats and maggots? The war, was it just fantasy? Was the bad place fantasy? Were Mama and Papa fantasy? There was a knock on the door and for a moment, you thought maybe the war was real. Maybe you were having a flashback, and that was a shot ringing out in the silence, a shot that started the war all over and made it real? There was a second knock, and you were brought back to the reality of eyes that weren't yours staring at you from the mirror. YN, are you ready to go? We are going to be late to school if we don't leave now, and you know Father will not tolerate that. You squeezed the cold counter and let it bite into your flesh for a moment before saying, I'm ready. That was what you had to do. The rats subsided and rather than eating at your brain, they scurried down your throat and began to gnaw at your heart and lungs instead. Shouldering your backpack and opening in the door, you were met with a well-groomed idiot, Shoto. His hair, half red and half white, was combed nicely, and you could even smell the faintest scent of cologne. You sniffed. Bergamot, definitely. Sniffing again, you said, Is that Axe? His face deadpan as usual, he shrugged. I thought it would be good for our first day. You smirked. The girls are going to die for you, Shoto. Shoto's eyes widened. They'll die. A laugh rocked through your body and had you clutching your knees. Hunched and wheezing, you couldn't speak. He took the hand towel from the place it hung, wetted it, and then began to rub at his neck. You only laughed harder. Shoo! Shoto abruptly stopped cleaning cologne from his neck. Yes, father? Endeavor stormed into my room. You are going to be late for your first day at UA. That is unacceptable. The taxi driver is waiting on you. Rolling your eyes, you quietly plucked the headset from the side pocket of your backpack and put them over your ears to drown Shoto's father out. Endeavor didn't even notice. He never noticed you. Quickly, we were hustled out into the taxi for our first day of school. From inside the car, you watched as house after house, person after person, thing after thing passed in a blur. That's all life really was, things passing us by. Oh, Shoto. He pet his head to the side. Cologne won't kill girls. That was a metaphor for them liking you. He furrowed his brows. Liking me? A smile tugged at your lips. Yeah, like a crush. Red crept into his cheeks. Oh. The laughs returned, but as we ascended the hill, a sense of dread suddenly wedged itself into your chest. Looking up front, between the car seats, you saw UA's twin buildings on the horizon. People would be there. Students. You had grown accustomed to Shoto's presence since Endeavor had adopted you, but he was all you were ever around. You were hardly allowed to be around his siblings, and because you were homeschooled with Shoto, you never met other kids. And before, you didn't really do friends. Or people in general. Looking at the palms of your hands, you grasped your left wrist and thought of what stirred beneath your skin. It was more a scratch, a clawing. That thing inside of you. Endeavor called it a superpower, a quirk. You called it the thing. It had a mind of its own and wanted to be let out. You felt the rats and maggots return to your brain, the mad tugging at your thoughts in every direction possible. Your feelings pulled you every which way and simultaneously crushed you like a grape. Pulled and pushed and scratched. It scratched at your blood vessels, clawed at your skin, begged to be let out of this prison of a body. Your grasp around the left wrist became a noose, and you choked the life out of your victim like a boa constrictor around prey. A prison, that's what your body was. For the thing. Looking into your palm, you saw a mirror that wasn't there. The noose tightened. What if that thing was just you? A warm hand grasped your wrist, the wrist you had been hanging unjustly. Wyan, are you okay? Shoto asked, head ped and brows burrowed. Letting go of your wrist, you sighed. Sorry, I was just thinking. Outside the window, trees began to pass by rather than houses and people. Still just things that would one day turn to dust like all the rest. Shoto's brows furrowed more. Is your quirk bothering you again? At its mention, it sprung forth and scratched beneath your skin again. Ignored it and shook your head. No. I was just thinking of school. Just in time with your words, we pulled up to UA's front gates, its large blue arch now standing proudly before us with the golden Y ingrained at the top. Beyond the gates, students in the same gray uniform you wore bustled excitedly. They were like bees swarming the campus, like an army surging forward to meet its fate in Hell College. Oh, God save me. But gods never come when we call them, do they? They like to watch us squirm and beg and pray, and that you would not be doing any time soon. You pushed open the car door and sighed. Welp, here it was, your first day at Hell's doorstep. UA, here I come. There it was again, the black hole. A great pit of nothingness opened up inside of you as you and Shoto made your way through the halls of UA. A small, childish part of you marveled in the fact that legends had once walked these halls, and soon-to-come legends would most certainly walk them, too. However, you did not feel like a legend. Quite the opposite, actually. Shoto was to be the legend, not you. Speak of the devil, he elbowed you. Are you all right? Shoto asked. On the surface, he was relaxed with his hands stuffed in his pockets and his face calm. However, you knew him too well. It must be his father on his mind. That man, too, had walked these halls. Some would call him a legend, but you thought differently of him. He was no legend, just a man with hate in his heart. Maybe that was harsh, but you didn't care. There was no room for empathy left in your heart. YN, he repeated. I'm fine, you bit back. You already asked and I already told you. You're so rude, a voice in your head said. He's just worried about you. He cares. Well, I don't care, you bit back at that little, empathetic voice. Shoto shrugged his shoulders as we passed room after room. All the while, you searched for Class 1A. You avoided looking at those great glass windows on the right where outside the city lay below. Views like that only reminded you of the life millions of people were blessed with that you'd never have. You just keep tapping your head and scrunching your eyebrows, so I thought something was bothering you. That's what you do whenever you're upset. You rolled your eyes, sighing. I'm fine. I just don't want to go to college, especially not one for heroes. You spat the last word with as much venom as you could muster. Heroes had never been there for you when you most needed them, and when they had shown up, you hadn't wanted them to. It would have been better if they had just left you to die in that rubble. But we never die, do we? That's what he had said long ago, So long ago you were sure it was a fantasy you'd conjured up to add drama to your bland, monotonous life. In the distance, buildings crumbled once more, and rats ate away at the gray matter in your brain. The war, the man with white hair, the barren wasteland, dead bodies everywhere. It's just a daydream, a voice in your head said. You weren't even sure if that voice was yours or not. It was certainly your thought which came from your head, but you could never be sure which thoughts were yours or from others inside your head. It was always so loud in your head. It was exhausting. You shook your head, tempted to listen to music to drown the thoughts out, or at least give a nice background music to accompany them, but then Shoto would really be concerned and would never leave you be. He already squinted his eyes at your head shake, so music would only raise his suspicions more. However, saved by the classroom, or whatever the saying was, you finally spied 1A, its grand red door just to your left up ahead. There it is, you said, pointing to the classroom. Already, you could hear a commotion within. Oh gods. Save me from socializing. I don't want to. Please. You cried out in your mind. There was no response. There never was, actually, but you still felt they heard. They just refused to answer like the scumbags they were. Zeus could smite you down right now for calling him a beach, but that would only be doing you a favor. Death would be the greatest gift the gods could give you, but it seemed you were a precious pawn in their game and they couldn't kill you. So, Zeus and all those Olympians and all the rest were beaches. Little, pee-pee but beaches, just a bunch of babies with too much power. They were not gods but rather children with too long of lives and too great of gifts. You stood before the big red door and Shoto eyed you. Are you going to open it? Eyes cutting over to him, you scowled. You do it. I am the lady and you the gentleman, right? That was sarcasm. You were certainly no lady, although he was a gentleman. When he was able to read social cues. Shoto slid open the door, and you were immediately met with the loud, chaotic chatter of teenagers. The only way you could describe them was in a few words: bright, colorful, and passionate. At first glance, you could already tell that each one of them was hard-working and driven, everything you were not. You didn't want to work, you didn't want to try. You just wanted to get this life over with, to do the required, monotonous things of life, and then to die. The day you turned to dust would be the greatest day of your life. One might say, why don't you just kill yourself then? Well, that requires effort and you had none of that. These students, however, did. And they had lots of it. It was UA, the most prestigious hero school in Japan, so you would have expected no less. Their energy and joy still irked you. We'll show them. We'll make them realize how terrible the world is, make sure they never smile again. Heroes aren't real, and we'll show them. We'll wipe all the colors from the earth and turn it barren. A voice, one you were unfortunately familiar with, said inside your head. You ignored it, pushing it aside with all the other rats and maggots. Instead of paying attention to the rats, you went to choose your seat. You preferred the back seats, but only one was left naturally. The socially inept imbecile took it before you could. He smiled smugly and you stuck your tongue out at him in protest. Childish, you knew. You, however, didn't care. Now, scanning the classroom full of bright, happy teens, you realized there were only 2 seats left. In between those 2 seats sat an abrasive, cocky blonde who had his feet kicked up on his desk. His uniform hung loosely on his body, and he clearly had refused to wear his tie in an attempt to be rebellious. To go with this rebellious look, he sported an arrogant grin and mischievous red eyes. The rebellious boy was currently in a petty squabble with another student, but you could care less to pay attention to their chatter. Instead, you pondered whether you should sit in front of or behind the loud, exceedingly irritating boy. As you thought, another student walked in right before the bell. The classroom's chatter stopped abruptly, and you didn't fail to notice how the blonde boy's haughty expression was wiped clean from his face. In its place was a frown of chiseled, cold stone. Guess he didn't like that green-haired kid. Ignoring the chatter the other students started up with the newcomer, you chose the seat directly in front of Blondie. Well, it would have been a struggle to see over that kid's head. It was so large metaphorically and literally, especially since his hair was spiked up like someone rubbed a balloon over his head. Sitting down in your new seat, You felt Blondie's crimson eyes glaring daggers into the back of your head. Maybe you hadn't made the right decision. Before you could change seats, though, there was a sudden voice that abruptly stopped all talking in the room. Himaizawa. He had been the hero to save you all those years ago. Your quirk had gotten so out of control, he was the only one who could stop you. His power was canceling quirks. Thus, it didn't really feel like he saved you. It honestly felt more like he saved the world from you. Or had that just been a daydream too? It was nothing but a memory left to rot with the dead of the past, and memories and daydreams blurred together in a never-ending spiral of rats and hell in your head. Aizawa stood up out of his sleeping bag, and it was the same tired face as before except older. You had been around 9 or 10 at the time. You were now 18, so that would have been about 8 or 9 years ago. Nearly a decade. Memory wasn't your strong suit, though, so you weren't sure of your exact age, but it was sometime around then. Whenever you tried to figure out the exact ages you had been at various times in your life, you drew a blank which only invited rats. Thus, you just didn't try to remember. You just left them blank. However, now that Aizawa stood before you in his black suit and scarf as usual, the blanks were no longer blanks but rather gigantic rats and spiders and maggots and termites that swarmed inside your head, devouring you completely. You swallowed forcefully. It was overly tempting to get your headphones on and to blast music, but according to Aizawa, we were going outside to do a quirk assessment test. Not only would you not be allowed headphones, but you would have to use your quirk with him around. The rats and insects ate not just at your brain but at every last atom of your body, and you felt your thoughts pull and push and tug like a mad game of tug-of-war from every direction at once. You couldn't. You weren't a hero. You were the opposite of that, a monster. A monster created in a lab. Or were you always a monster? Is that why your second papa had wanted you? Was that why he called you special? Was that why he had loved you and you only? Because you were a monster? Had he simply changed you to make you more useful? More human? More godlike? What were you? You might have started banging your head on the desk in front of you had Shoto not put a comforting hand on your shoulder. Are you ready to go? You shook yourself and looked into Shoto's heterochromic eyes, but you didn't see him. All you saw were memories, daydreams, termites. Are you ready to go? Go where, Mama? To your new home? You'll have a new papa who will teach you how to control your quirk. Then you won't have to be hidden away at home all the time. At home with papa, she meant. I don't want a new papa. I don't want a papa at all. Papas are bad. Mama frowned. This papa will be good. He'll help you. He'll love you and care for you like your father and I cannot. But where are we going? Where is this new papa? There was silence. He is. He will be a good papa. Shoto shook you. We've got to go. We're going to be late for the quirk assessment test. You shook your head forcibly. Sorry. Let's go. Leaving your precious headphones behind, you and Shoto left the empty classroom behind, but you could have sworn you saw someone at the edge of the door before the two of you walked out. Maybe you were just hallucinating. After all, you were FING crazy literally. Hallucinations weren't foreign, and they certainly weren't rare. But a part of you wondered if that presence at the door was real. Had that been Blondie? You wondered. Your quirk was good at recognizing specific molecular compositions, and before the thing had fled, you had sensed a compound which was unique to him. You hadn't figured out what compound it was yet, as you hadn't given it much thought, but you vaguely sense it. But no, that was just a daydream. A hallucination. That was all anything ever was. Rats. 12 years ago. Your new papa did not have a face, yet for some reason, you could see clear as day what he was supposed to look like. A strong young man with luscious white hair and gray eyes. He also had a peculiar mouth, one that smiled from ear to ear, literally. It gave you déjà vu, reminded you of something you couldn't remember. Feeling along your face, you traced a smile from ear to ear. Smile, your mother had said a few minutes prior to this moment. You had been frowning, unhappy at this new home which was gray, dull, cold, and colorless. It was nothing but concrete walls, at least in the room you had been allowed in so far. There was no furniture, no decorations, nothing but concrete, all gray and cold to the touch. Now, you smiled although you were far from happy. There was no reason to smile, but there was something truly deranged about you at the moment. The unhappiness actually was what made you smile. You found you couldn't cry like usual. Instead, you felt the need to laugh. Although you didn't. Instead, you ran the pad of your finger along your cheeks from ear to ear, just like the mouth, the smile of your new papa. Your new papa crouched before you, so he would be level with you. You were young and short, so he towered above you when he didn't crouch. Now that he was level with you, gray eyes which were not there stared into your own eyes. Hello, Hafizi. You were taken aback. That's not my name. The mouth you could physically see, the larger, longer one you could only see inside your mind, quirked into a smile. Is it not? He said mockingly. No, that's a character I made up. You longed to hold your mama's hand, but both your mama and papa stood far off to the side, huddled in the corner of the room. Your original papa watched with no emotion on his face. Your mama tried to look the same, but there was clear worry on her face in the way she furrowed her eyebrows and frowned ever so slightly. She also fiddled with her hands. It made you anxious. You fidgeted with your hands just as your mama did. A character you made up? Your new papa said with alarmingly fake surprise. You nodded your head and pouted your lips. How creative, he said. The way he emphasized creative made it seem as though he believed otherwise. Well, tell me this story you created. You scowled. Who are you? Your new papa laughed. The sound grated at your mind like nails on a chalkboard. You had heard that laugh before, but you couldn't recall where you had heard it. I am going to be your new papa. We are family after all. You stomped your foot. You are not my family. Your temper was rising like a pot of boiling water. Nothing inside of you liked this man. However, the fact that he felt so familiar more so than even mama and papa was beginning to really bother you. You wanted to know what was going on, and this new papa seemed like he wasn't going to give you any answers. Your temper just made him laugh more. It was a smooth, calm laugh. That irritated you even more. Always so stubborn and temperamental, Hafizi, he said with a click of his tongue. You scowled. My name isn't Hafizi. Non-existent eyes looked you up and down. He reached forward and put a hand on your shoulder. You tensed up, but he held tightly to you. Tell me that story you so creatively made up. You might have been young, but you weren't stupid. Your original papa was friends with this new papa. For as long as you could remember, they had done some sort of business together. Once you had even heard papa say something about the man taking people's powers away, and yours had conveniently just manifested. To everyone's horror. It was bloody and volatile. Your quirk was so dangerous, they had to quarantine you at home. However, it didn't bother you. In fact, you liked the violent ability you had. You had always dreamed of being a hero, and this quirk would make it easy to take down bad guys just like you saw on TV. At that moment, you wished a hero would come save you. They never did though. No matter how much you prayed every night for them to save you from your papa, they never came. No one was coming to save you. You had to save yourself, and now you had the power to do that. You stomped your foot again. I will not let you take my quirk. If you try to, I'll kill you and anyone else that tries to take it. He seemed to like that. A lot. He smiled even wider, and you could almost physically see that inhumane, ear-to-ear smile. There's the spirit, Hafizi. You haven't changed one bit. You truly are adamantine. This new papa began to rub your shoulder with his thumb. The urge to pull away was overwhelming, but his grip on you was bruising. The look he was giving you was enough to freeze you in place, too, as if his grip wasn't caging enough. Swallowing a dry lump in your throat, you squirmed in place. You fidgeted with your hands, glancing back at your parents. They were unchanged, although Mama seemed more anxious. Papa was like a stone statue. You looked at the new Papa, forcing yourself to speak. He seemed to want that. What is adamantine? You asked. Without answering you, he said, your mother used to call you Adamanti. Do you remember that, Hafizi? You froze. A voice in your head screamed, but you didn't know why. Rather than tell him about this strange screaming in your head, where did it come from? You shook your head from side to side. I don't know what you're talking about. He continued to smile. Don't worry. I'm not going to take your quirk away from you. No, in fact, I want to teach you to use it to the best of your ability. What I want most of all, though, is for you to remember. Remember what? You stood as still and unmoving as your original Papa. But was he the original? This new Papa reached a hand up and began to slide your hair. Now, tell me that story you made up. The one about Hafizi. Present day. Standing with Class 1A on a dirt field outside of UA, you found yourself grasping your left wrist again. Now that you were wearing UA's ugly, red, white, and blue P uniforms, everyone could see your compression sleeves on your forearms. The typical UA uniform had long sleeves, so no one could see the sleeves you wore, but in this outfit, the sleeves were exposed to everyone. It made you feel so bare. You squeezed your wrist. Aware of Shoto eyeing your nervous fidgets, you let go and held your hands behind your back. Here at UA, we are not tethered to tradition, Aizawa said, that monotonous tone grating away at your mind. The effort you put forth to keep the literal insanity at bay was so great that normal people could have built the very pyramids with the force of it. Despite your invisible battle, Aizawa kept on. That means I get to run my class however I see fit. His back faced the class, and he stared at some sort of device. You have been taking standardized tests your entire lives, but you never got the chance to use your quirks in physical exams. He turned around, his solid brown eyes landing directly on you before cutting to Blondie. Aizawa said something to him, but you didn't hear. Instead, your mind strayed off track like usual. Maybe those memories weren't fantasy after all? Aizawa seemed to remember you. If he actually did remember, it was only those memories which were real. The others, that war, those people. The memories exploded like millions of rats running every which way, like maggots pulsing and thrumming. All I want is for you to remember, he had said. There's still hope. She's here. She is not dead. Don't stop fighting. Orange-red hair and green eyes shone bright and colorful in a sea of gray and crimson. There is no certainty in hope. If there was, it wouldn't be hope. Hope is not a fact, it is a feeling. Take this power, cherish it, pass it on to someone worthy. You smiled despite the sorrow which overcame you. White hair soaked up all the red. It was warm and sticky. Stay strong, my adamanti. World needs you. A barren wasteland with a river running red, ash falling like snow, dead bodies everywhere. Even those green eyes were dull, just like the gray of the world you once called home. We never die, do we, Hafizi? Those weren't real. Maybe that barren wasteland and those collapsing buildings Aizawa had saved you from was real, but those things Papa had shown you were not. Other memories, worser, more complex ones, rose up in your head like vomit, but you forced them down. Those weren't real. An explosion shook you from your thoughts, and there was a cloud of smoke which clouded your vision for a moment. The smoke dispersed, and you suddenly saw that blonde, arrogant boy smirking like a madman. 705.2 meters? The class shouted, as Aizawa showed his score to the class. The device he held up caught the sun and reflected it. The class was awestruck. Aizawa still looked bored and unimpressed. This Bakugu guy is crazy awesome. Wow! Some kid with yellow hair shouted. This only made the supposed Bakugu smirk even more madly. His smile bordered on insanity, his eyes holding a maniac gleam inside of them. He flexed his fingers and hunched his back in a gremlin-like position. Something warm bubbled up inside of you at the sight of his vicious grin and explosive power. You found yourself smiling stupidly, cheeks heating up. It was gratitude you felt. After all, he had forced you from your horrible memories. Gratitude. That was definitely what you felt as you looked at him, his deranged smile, and his ridiculously lean arms which glistened in the summer heat. Shoto bit his lip, nearly laughing. If Aizawa hadn't been standing right there, you would have punched him in his perfect face. However, you restrained yourself. Ellen, Aizawa said. Startled, you whipped toward your teacher. The entire class, bedecked with smiles and bright colors your memories desperately lacked, stared at you. Bakugu stared at you, too, eyes narrowing. His red eyes were like lasers which burned through you. You grasped your left wrist and shrunk into yourself. Yeah. Your turn to throw. You don't have to go all out. Just stay in the circle and use your quirk to throw the ball. There was a telling look in his eyes which told you he did in fact remember that cursed day. That was probably why he was currently singling you out. You sighed and walked up to the circle. Bakugo tossed the softball to you, giving you a scowl before joining the rest of the class. Into the circle you stepped. Your hands got sweaty, an ocean forming on your palms. The softball was like a lead weight in your hand. Looking at the rest of the class, 20 of them excluding you, you noticed how innocent all of them looked. Even Shoto looked naive compared to. Your brain blanked. You couldn't handle the rats and termites in your brain anymore. Thus, your brain just went quiet. It was not the type of quiet you gained from meditation and clarity, not the restful type normal people had. Instead, it was an abyss. Nothingness yawned inside of you, and suddenly, your mood switched like a light. A cold, icy rage washed over you instead. Those stupid idiots shouldn't be smiling, you thought. They shouldn't be bright and colorful, not when my life is gray and dull, not when my home is nothing but a barren wasteland of blood and dust and ash. There is no such thing as heroes, and we will show them. Your home, your loved ones had long ago been eaten by the maggots and termites, just like your mind was being consumed by them now. The thought of it brought about that scratching inside of you. Your quirk stirred within your skin, and rather than suppressing it like normal, you let it free. Suddenly you saw everything. Hell erupted within you, and the rats exploded. There was a mad tugging at your consciousness for control, for attention, for a chance to devour. Inside your mind, there was a strange language you somehow understood. It told you the molecules around you, what things contained what elements made them up, the temperature, the pH, the pressure, and for some reason you even saw astrology signs next to each molecule, compound, and element. Your quirk ate up knowledge and fed it to you in an endless stream. It was so overwhelming, you wanted to smash your head in with a rock, but that mood swing had teeth. You stood tall, back straight and head high. Taking in your surroundings with your eyes rather than just your quirk, you eyed the class. Each one of them had strong quirks, your power told you. They were all strong and somewhat intelligent, and they would all serve as formidable opponents. They peered at you curiously, and Aizawa frowned. They were waiting on you to throw the softball. They blinked. Stupid humans, you thought. Weak, helpless creatures with no right to power. We all stood on a barren dirt field designed for physical activity and games. However, it was a good field for fighting, for pitched battles and slaughter. The class, all youthful, healthy, and energetic, stood there staring at you with bright eyes. So much color, you'd make sure to take that from them one day. Today, you could easily do it with a flick of the wrist. Bending down and putting a hand on the ground, you felt the air stir around you. The pads of your fingers felt the grainy, dusty dirt you stood on, but with your quirk, you felt all the components of that dirt, of the air above it. You also felt all the molecules and compounds which made up the class bodies. With half a thought, they would be nothing but dust. You had the power, but when you opened your eyes and saw red eyes narrowing on you, the thoughts dissipated faster than their bodies ever could have. That boy was not naive, nor was he ignorant and happy like a fool. That scowl, that ugly frown, he understood how the world worked. The warmth blossomed inside of you again, and your mood flip-flopped. Looking at your palm, you saw the dusty dirt which stuck to your sweaty skin. In no way did you want those students or anyone to become that dust on your hands. Your quirk retreated back into its cage within, that evil side of you doing so as well. You stood up. Clutching the softball in one hand, you smiled at Bakugo. He scowled back even harder. Sighing, you threw the softball. It thudded on the dirt. There was silence. Aizawa stared at his device and then at you. He sighed. You have to use your quirk, LN. Shoto shook his head with disappointment, although if he had known what had just been going through your mind he wouldn't be so let down. A few feet from him stood Bakugo. With arms still crossed in front of him, his eyes were wide and alarmed. Aizawa rubbed his eyes and sighed again. You have to use your quirk if you want to stay at UA. You knew if it had been anyone else, he probably would have expelled them. But he knew why you refused to perform. He understood. After all, he was the only one who knew what you were truly capable of. I thought you didn't have to have a quirk to get into UA, you said with a shrug. That green-haired boy, the one Bakugu seemed to hate, lit up at that. He smiled. Aizawa, however, did not. Just use your DMN quirk. The class gawked at his profanity and irritation. You laughed, a smirk playing at your lips. I mean, if you say so. Knowing he would never let you leave if you didn't at least use your quirk once, you let it ever so slightly out of its cage and threw the DMN softball. It went much further, the thud quieter this time and less incriminating. Aizawa showed everyone the number, 202.4 meters. Nothing compared to Bakugu's. The class seemed disappointed. However, Aizawa was satisfied. He knew how difficult that had been for you, how you seldom used your quirk unless forced to by endeavor. Aizawa knew what using that quirk meant for you. Thus, he didn't berate you for not giving your best. You filed back into line with the rest of the class, taking your place by Shoto. You didn't fail to notice the look Bakugu gave you. Ignoring it, you gave Shoto a mock smile. How did I do? He furrowed his eyebrows and crossed his hands over his chest. What happened out there? Refusing to look at him or to answer, you instead paid attention to the way the disappointed silence from earlier had erupted into a frenzy of excitement. I can't wait to go, a pink girl shouted. Yeah, that looks like fun, someone else cried. Aizawa wasn't having it. For that, you thanked him. So you think this is playtime? He asked with a maniac smile. There will be 8 tests to gauge your ability, and whoever comes in last will be expelled immediately. There was an outcry of discontent amongst them. Some of them wailed, others complained, but you understood why Aizawa was so cruel. After all, the world was hard, and if you were soft, it would crush you. There was no place in the world for soft heroes. Bakugu seemed to agree. Unlike the rest of your classmates, he gave Aizawa that maniacal smile at the challenge proposed. Again, warmth blossomed inside of you. He was different from the others. He wasn't naive or ignorant. He knew what cruelty the world had to offer and was willing to take it on unlike you. You couldn't even take on your own thoughts. The warm feeling turned leaden. Aizawa interrupted the class complaints and cries. Show me it's no mistake you're here, he said. And with that, the test began. You didn't use your quirk again. Not once. It clearly disappointed Shoto and the rest of the curious class, but you were not an object meant to sate others' curiosity and need for entertainment. You did test after test with nothing but your semi-capable body. There, however, was another student who refused to use his quirk, Midoriya. Or as Bakugu called him, Deku. Did he not have a quirk? He had to have one though. You had sensed it with your quirk. It was the most powerful of all the students' quirks, Aizawa's included. It was strangely similar to your own, actually. That must be why he didn't use it. It must have been volatile and destructive, something he couldn't control like your power. Silently, you pitied the boy. You still made no attempt to socialize with him or anyone else, though. Instead, you stayed glued to Shoto's side and followed him around like a lost puppy. Midway through the tests, he turned to you. Go try to make friends, he said, ushering towards the girls who giggled and talked amongst each other. Dread weighed your body down like a weight. Absolutely not. He pushed gently at you. Go. Quit following me around. You refused to budge. No, I can't, you said with rising panic. I don't know what to say. He pushed again. Just start with introducing yourself and then maybe ask them about themselves. Nearly gang, you groaned. I hate small talk. I'd rather die than make small talk. Shoto quit pushing you and gave up with a sigh. The two of you walked towards your next activity, long jump. One day, you will have to go your own path separate from me, he said as he walked. You didn't respond. Instead, you watched him use his ice to propel himself many dozens of meters forward. Following suit, you jumped. 12 feet and 2 inches. Shoto gave you an exasperated look. Do you want to get yourself expelled? You shrugged. That would be nice, actually. The hot summer rays beat down on you, and you felt sweat run down your back. Quirk stirring, it attempted to cool the air around you, but you forced it back into its cage. Shoto pointed to the students around them. They all leapt and ran and did the various activities, all with vigor and passion. Even if father wouldn't lose his mind if you got expelled, wouldn't you be even a little sad? You frowned innocently at him. And why would I be sad? He face-palmed. Whatever. I can't change your mind. The two of you made your way to the next activity, but you already wanted to go home. Even though you had only been at school for half an hour, you already felt exhausted. However, you continued dragging yourself along from activity to activity. Your mood didn't change until the rest of the class was forced to do the softball throw. Having completed all your tasks by now, you felt relieved. Now, all you wanted was to lie in bed and scroll through your phone mindlessly. However, up next, Midoriya took the circle. Apparently, he had destroyed a huge robot in the entrance exams. You had gotten in on recommendations, so you hadn't seen it, but that was what everyone else reported. Bakugo had apparently not seen his display of power either, despite having been at the entrance exam with everyone else. "Quirkless loser," he murmured. Again, your heart warmed at him. He was so grumpy, so unlike the rest of his smiley classmates. Almost everyone seemed to be radiating happiness, and it made you feel so alone. Alone in your suffering, alone in memories, alone in a world full of normal, jolly people. He, however, was not jolly and definitely not normal. You stared at him, not even hearing what was going on around you. Actually, now that you thought about it, he was kinda cute. That scowl made him even cuter. Bakugo suddenly caught your eyes, and you cut your attention back to Midoriya as quickly as possible. The green-haired, supposedly quirkless kid, according to Blondie, was staring intently at the softball. It was like he was trying to manifest his power by looking at the object he was supposed to use it on. There was a chuckle from your left. "You have a crush," Shoto whispered, his scarred skin crinkling around his eye as he smiled. "I do not," you whispered loud enough for Bakugo to give you a weird look. The look wasn't his typical scowl, but more of a curious one, like he knew you were talking about him. Shoto laughed again. "I thought you didn't do friends." "I don't," you said under your breath. Midoriya continued to stare at the softball, and the class continued to murmur. "What do you think his quirk is?" someone whispered. Bakugo quit paying you attention and shouted, "He doesn't have a quirk, idiot." "Well, that's not true," a guy with glasses and overly rigid arms said. "He has a quirk. I saw him use it at the entrance exam." Bakugo shouted back, and little explosions danced at his palms as he screamed. Shoto smirked at you. "That's the one you chose to crush on?" You bunched your hands into fists and waved them around wildly. "I don't like him." "And be a little more quiet or he'll hear you," you said, trying to keep your voice low. Shoto just laughed. "Maybe you should go talk to him after class." You scowled at him, shoving your hands in your pockets to keep from hitting him over the head. Just then, Midoriya threw the softball. It landed with an anticlimactic thump, having hardly made it further than your first throw. Bakugo barked a laugh. "Told you he didn't have a quirk." The rest of the class was bewildered and gawked at Midoriya. Aizawa, however, had his hair standing up on his head, his scarf hovering around him. That was proof that Midoriya did in fact have a quirk, because whenever Aizawa did that, he was erasing someone's quirk. You of all people would know. When Aizawa walked up to Midoriya to give him some sort of talk, you said, loudly enough for the whole class to hear, "He does have a quirk. Aizawa's quirk is erasing other people's powers. He just took Miradoriya's quirk away." The class gaped at you. A guy with shoulder-length black hair and bulky elbows put a hand out beside him. "Why would he take his quirk away, though?" he asked in a nasally voice. The guy beside him, one with red hair which was gelled into spikes, looked you up and down. "Is that what Aizawa did with your first throw?" The whole class now had their eyes fixed on you, and you felt like turning invisible. That, unfortunately, was not your quirk. You shook your head. "No. I just didn't use my power." They all gave you puzzled looks. "Why in the world did you not use it?" the guy with glasses asked. Shoto stared intently at you but didn't say anything or come to your rescue. Instead, he glared at you as if to say, "You got yourself into this hole, so you get yourself out of it." That was rich coming from the guy who refused to use his fire powers because of his daddy issues. With no hero swooping in to save the day, the class continued to blink at you, awaiting an answer. You were keenly aware of the way Bakugo's piercing red eyes bore into you. You swallowed. "I just didn't want to use it. It takes a lot out of me," and I wanted to save it for other things that were more important. Bakugo laughed. With his hands in his pockets, he strode over to you. He only came to a stop when he was close enough that you could see the beads of sweat running down the smooth skin of his face. So we have two liars in the class, huh? First shitty Deku lies to me about not having a quirk his whole DMN life, and now, you're lying about why you didn't use your dumb quirk. All the blood in your body rushed to your face. I'm not lying, you said, your voice betraying you. He leaned forward and got in your face. Suddenly, you caught the scent of caramel, and your quirk leapt forward in your mind without permission. So that was the compound you had sensed earlier. That unique compound was nitroglycerin, which is how he created his explosions. You finally recognized it and realized with a start he had in fact been eavesdropping on you and Shoto's conversation earlier. You weren't saving it for other things. If you had been, you would have used it on other DMN tests, but you didn't use it once. What are you hiding, Sleeves? He said, giving you a horrible nickname, one that shamed you and all you had done to yourself. On top of the burning self-loathing you now felt, you smelled the caramel of the nitroglycerin, the sweet scent mingling in your nostrils dangerously. It was a volatile chemical, nearly as volatile as his mood. Nearly as volatile as your quirk. In response, it stirred beneath your skin. It felt challenged, threatened by his imposing presence. He was too close, and he was trying to figure out your secrets. His red eyes tore you apart almost like those doctor's tools had, and you suddenly felt like you were strapped to a table with 4-point restraints all over again. Your quirk reared its ugly head and thrummed beneath your skin. It felt like every atom in your body was vibrating, pulsing, waiting. The class watched silently as the two of you faced off against each other, but before there was a chance for violence to break out, there was a loud whoosh. Aizawa showed Midoriya the score on his device. 705.3 meters. Midoriya got exactly 0.1 meters ahead of Bakugo. Ha, that serves Blondie right, you thought. The class gasped. Bakugo exploded, literally. He propelled himself towards the poor boy, screaming, "So you were lying to me all these years, Deku?" Aizawa, to no surprise, caught him with his scarf and berated him. While he scolded the explosive, angry blonde boy, you noticed that Midoriya's finger was broken. So that's why he didn't use it, you thought to yourself. It hurts his body. He was like you in a way. Although you didn't destroy yourself, your quirk was violently powerful too. However, yours was much more deadly. The thought of collapsing buildings crept into the back of your mind, but you were done with rats for the day. Putting a plug on your thoughts, you appreciated the way Midoriya beamed a triumphant smile. "Oh, and I lied," Aizawa said suddenly. "No one's going home." Everyone sighed with relief, and Midoriya looked as if his spirit left his body and returned. He nearly started crying. Bakugo just rolled his eyes, still scowling and clenching his fists as he eyed Midoriya. Then, Aizawa dismissed everyone and gave them leave to go home, saying how they would start their first day of hero training tomorrow and to come prepared. You and Shoto began to walk off the field, but before you made it as much as 10 feet, Aizawa cleared his throat. "Ellen, can I talk to you for a minute?" he said. The whole class looked on curiously but continued to make their way back to the school. You looked around to see how Bakugo would respond, but he was already gone, completely out of sight. You ignored the slight disappointment you felt at that and made your way to your old acquaintance. Shoto waited patiently as you walked over to Aizawa. You tried your best to suppress the terror, but it washed over you anyway. "What's up?" you asked casually, as if you were not panicking at the thought of whatever it was he had to say. Aizawa gave you a sharp look. He put away his device into one of his many pockets and then shoved his hands in them. Slouching, he gave you a tired look. "I know you don't want to be here, but you have to at least try a little bit." You just gave him a blank look, curling and uncurling your sweaty hands beside you. It took every ounce of restraint not to break down crying before him. It bubbled up inside your chest, but you swallowed it down. The collapsing buildings, the wailing screams, the fires, the ash. All so much like that non-existent war. Memories, daydreams, reality. It was all so warped. Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose. "Look, I understand how you feel about being here and using your quirk." He didn't. But in order to at least pass your classes, You have to use your quirk a little bit. He let go of the bridge of his nose and stared into your eyes. And I would encourage you to do more than just pass, but I know that's asking too much of you, isn't it? His words were like a stab to the heart. Once upon a time, you hadn't just done the bare minimum to pass. You had wanted to be the greatest hero of all time, to be. You pushed down the memories of your past fantasies. That's all those things in your head were, fantasy. You had made them up like one writes a story. It had been nothing more. Aizawa's words still hurt though. You knew you were wasting the potential you had, insulting yourself practically. But you couldn't find it in you to truly give a F dash. You were tired, exhausted. You couldn't even save yourself, much less other people, so how would you ever become a hero? It felt as if you were dying, wasting away while still alive, but you couldn't pull yourself from the pits of your mind. You needed a hero, but those weren't real. Those were fantasies just like your daydreams of being the great hero, Hafizi. You didn't even know what the word meant. It had just come to you when you were a kid, and you had liked it. Now, it was a cursed name you'd never use. Heroes were just celebrities in silly costumes that waved and smiled at the camera. That's all they were. These students were no different. You still couldn't help but long for someone to save you, but you didn't mean in the physical sense like Aizawa had. You needed someone to save you, actually save you from the hell you lived in within your mind. Some would say you needed a therapist or anti-anxiety pills, but you had tried those, and they did nothing. No, you needed someone to help you, to truly save you from yourself. After all, there was no worse villain than yourself. Nobody could hurt you like you hurt yourself. The sleeves proved that. You rubbed anxiously at your left forearm, feeling bare and naked all over again. Aizawa sighed. I get it. You don't want to try. Just don't be surprised when you start failing classes. UA doesn't tolerate students that don't try. I didn't expel you today because I know you have potential, but you better show me that wasn't a mistake. With that, he walked off towards the school and left you to wade in his words. You let them sit for a moment. You hurt, and then you walked towards Shoto. Ready to go home? You asked. The bright sunshine was nearly blinding as you turned towards the school. It was so bright, you could barely see without putting a hand over your eyes. Shoto looked at you with pity you didn't deserve. Sure, Wyan. I'm ready. But you weren't. You didn't think you'd ever be ready for anything. For some reason, the next day at school, you were popular. When you had arrived at school with Shoto, you had sat down, put your headphones on, and opened up a book. Quiet, serene a good morning. Then the students must have been possessed. That pink girl, Mina Ashido apparently, had been trying to figure out what everyone's quirks were. It didn't seem strategic on her part. Just curiosity at its finest. However, when she got to your quirk, she was utterly stumped. Bringing up how curious your quirk was and how you withheld your quirk for the majority of the tests, the students suddenly were gripped with a burning desire to know everything about you. Everyone in Class 1A crowded around your desk and bombarded you with questions. What's your quirk? Why didn't you use it on those tests? Did you not care if you got expelled? Are you and that super hot guy siblings? I didn't see you at the entrance exam. Did you get in on recommendations? Why are you so quiet? What are you reading? What music are you listening to? Do you have a crush on that mean guy, Bakugu? That one made you do a double take. Previously you had been half listening to them, one ear of your headphones pushed to the side to hear them. However, that question was the last straw. You pushed the headphones down around your neck, closed the book you had been trying to read, and turned to them. They stopped talking abruptly. In the corner of your eyes, you saw Blondie smirking at you, his feet kicked up on his desk and his hands behind his head. Why would you ask that? No? You shrieked. Jiru, the girl with purple hair and earbuds hanging from the lobes of her ears, twirled them around her fingers. You just were looking at him a lot. Ashido bounded up and down. Your face was getting so red when he threw the softball. And it was only the first day of school. The others murmured various things to themselves. You clenched your jaw, face heating up. I was just admiring his quirk. That made Ashido squeal even more. Shoto, from the back of the classroom, shot you a smug look. He was clearly amused, but you weren't. You would make sure to knock him on his butt. When you trained after school today. Blondie, the one you were unfairly accused of having a crush on, laughed. Hey, Sleeves, I'm not here for girls, so you should go crush on someone else. I'm here to be number one. Girls would just be a distraction. Normally, you felt timid and quiet. You didn't like to talk back or cause any trouble, and you definitely didn't like drawing attention to yourself. However, you had many personalities which were constantly waiting to show themselves. It was like you were driving a car, and the passengers had different ideas of how to drive or where to go. You were driving. You had control. That was until one of the passengers, one of the many, loud, obnoxious passengers which were constantly screaming at you about how and where to drive, forcibly took the wheel. And some of them weren't so nice. Some of them were reckless drivers, to say the least. You faked a look of childlike innocence, batting your eyelashes and putting a finger to your pouted lips, and said, "Oh, but boys aren't out of the question then?" Bakugu shot forward in his seat. "I didn't say that, you piece of garbage. I will destroy you." Keeping up the look of false innocence, you said in a sweet, high-pitched voice, "Oh, don't tempt me with a good time." The whole class laughed, and Ashido squealed. "Oh my gosh. They're so cute together." Bakugu slammed his hand on the desk, a small explosion dancing beneath his palm. "We're not together, him and Raccoon." This only made the class laugh harder. Midoriya sat behind Bakugu, hunching into himself and trying not to laugh. Honestly, he looked more afraid than amused. And confused. He looked very confused to see Blondie getting teased by the class. In an instant, that personality that took hold of you felt satisfied at where it had driven the car and went to sit in the back seat of your mind. You were left in control of the wheel. Embarrassed. Mortified. Why did I do that? You wondered, looking to the floor with a shake of your head. Just then Aizawa saved you. "You should all be in your seats," he said, seeming to appear in the doorway out of thin air. The entire class yelped and hurried to their seats. With that, the school day started. It was boring, so much different than homeschooling. You sat for hours, going from class to class without being able to stretch your legs for anything other than to walk to your next class. It made you restless and antsy. The thing that really made you skittish, though, was the red eyes which bore into the back of your head throughout all these classes. You could hardly focus. Not that you would have anyway. But if you had wanted to pay attention in class, Bakugu certainly would have prevented that with his persistent staring. You wanted to tell yourself he was staring because of the crush accusation, but he had been stalking you well before that. He had been eavesdropping on you and Shoto. What had you two said? What had you been doing? You remembered freaking out when Aizawa walked in the door, but you couldn't remember what you had done or said. However, Bakugu knew. His memory was probably better than yours, and he definitely had been listening from the doorway. What did he hear? Throughout the whole day, Bakugu continued to stare from the seat behind you. You tried to ignore it, but your quirk paid more attention to it than you. It stirred beneath your skin, whispering that you were being watched, to be on guard. You tried to hush it, but it wouldn't shut up, just like the personalities in your head wouldn't shut up. The more reckless, aggressive side of you was the loudest. It gave you irrational, overreactive suggestions. For example, it said we could just kill him. Sounds great, doesn't it? An argument warred in your head. He heard too much. He should die. The whole class should die. These false heroes should all die. That's wrong. I don't want to kill them. That guy's kinda cute, though. Shut up. Pay attention to the teacher. We're gonna fail. No one cares. We're gonna die one day, and grades won't matter. It's just a letter on a piece of paper. But that guy overheard. Everyone just shut the F up. That was just a small, oversimplified version of your brain. You wished it were as simple as a conversation like that, but it wasn't. It was never-ending, scattered, and hellish up in your head. There were constant emotions, memories, thoughts, and urges constantly warring for control of your head and heart, more importantly, though, for attention. Like you were the queen and they were the subjects, demanded their grievances be heard, lest they revolt and take the throne from you. That's why you would never pay attention in class, even if Bakugu hadn't been watching you all day. The only time you ever felt some sort of relief from all of this was when you blasted music and read a book. Sometimes, though, even that failed. It felt like someone was playing tug-of-war with your mind, but instead of two sides of the rope being tugged on, there were dozens, and at the center of it was your brain. Other times, it was so conflicting, it felt as if you were splitting in a million different ways, like you were looking into a broken, shattered mirror, and each shard reflected a different person, but no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't figure out which reflection was the real you. No amount of music or books could ever fix that. No therapist or pill could either. You were broken. And you couldn't be fixed. But that didn't matter. Nothing did. All that mattered was that you did the bare minimum to scrape by. Izawabid med, you weren't going to try. One of those reflections of yourself died inside at that. That part of you wanted to try to be the best student, try to be the best hero. That part of you wanted to be someone. Why do you humans spend your whole lives trying to be someone? A voice in your head thought mid-lecture. You already are someone. Do you not see that? You are all inherently someone. Well, you thought in return. We don't want to just be someone. We want to be special. So that's the point of human existence? Your entire, short, puny lives are spent trying to make yourselves immortal to no avail? No, you said to the thing inside of you. The scratching had momentarily subsided as that thing listened to you. It seldom did that. It's not about becoming immortal like a god. It's about having a purpose, about doing something with our lives that is meaningful. No one wants to die having not done anything with their life. To die like that would mean your life was meaningless. That thing inside you, that violent, malevolent thing scoffed. You don't have to do anything with your life to be meaningful. Live long enough, and you will see that there is no meaning to life at all. We live and we die. That is that. Just try to enjoy the time you have here. I never got to do that. I spent my life trying to do something meaningful, and look at me now. I'm in some random mortal's head. You nearly gasped aloud in the middle of the lecture. Present Mike was teaching the class English. He pointed to the phrase, "You walked the dog," and began to talk about it. Looking around, you found the students bored. Kaminari was fast asleep, drooling. Ida took notes avidly. Kirishima and Jairu stared off into the distance. The rest of the class had similar responses to present Mick's lecture. However, you tried your absolute hardest to not spiral into the depths of your mind and quirk. You straightened in your seat. That thing, your quirk, was it some sort of god? Of all the personalities in your head, that violent one had always been the most prominent figure. It not only troubled you the most, but it was the most unlike you. Maybe that was because that thing wasn't you at all. Maybe that thing inside you which stirred beneath your skin and had a mind of its own. Maybe it literally had a mind of its own. Maybe that thing was a god. With the way it called you immortal, it sure seemed like it. Shifting in your seat, you tried not to draw too much attention to yourself. You had to act like nothing had happened, like you were normal. You faked a yawn and propped your chin on your hand. You stared right through Present Mike and into your mind, though, attempting to see what that thing was. However, it was hidden from you. There was nothing but hazy darkness inside of your mind, but with a sort of sixth sense, you could feel eyes staring at you from within that haze. In doing this, you felt a strange quiet in your mind. Had all that turmoil come from this entity? Suddenly, a thought hit you like a bullet in the chest. Was that God in my head why Papa had wanted me all those years ago? You thought. The choice of not spiraling became less of a choice and more of a must. Was that thing in your head Hafizi? Was that what Papa had wanted you to remember? That war, that barren wasteland. You spiraled into memories and thoughts, the things of your mind pouring through you like an endless river of the pits of hell. None of that was real. That thing in your head wasn't real. Hafizi wasn't real. What even was Hafizi? What did it mean? You felt the sudden urge to look it up, but you couldn't while you were in class. Should you ask to go to the bathroom? Should you look during lunch? Why had you never bothered to look up what Hafizi meant after all these years? But Hafizi wasn't real. Those memories, they weren't real. None of it was. You stared intently at Present Mike, body stiff and hands shaking. Unintentionally, your leg bounced up and down rapidly with your thoughts. Those red eyes were lasers melting through your head, but you couldn't worry about what Bakugu thought of you right now. Looking into your mind, you found all those personalities. They took the form of people just as that thing seemed to. But you couldn't see the thing. The person you had just been talking to was gone. Even your quirk felt missing. Still staring at present Mike and the English words on the board, you silently tried to sense the molecules in the air but found you couldn't. That made you nearly bang your head into your desk. Had the thing left? Was that person in your head your quirk? If that person did leave, where did they go? And who were those other people? You had always thought them to be parts of you which had fragmented in that bad place as a child, but now, you weren't so sure. Feeling yourself near a full-on panic attack, you gripped your knees from beneath your desk as hard as you possibly could. This attack might have worsened had there not been a foot which kicked the back of your heel. Those red eyes stared into you for a moment and then were back on the chalkboard at the front of the classroom. The sound of the chalk scraping and dotting at the board was soothing in a way. It brought you out of your head and into the present. You listened to present Mike talk. You walk the dog is past tense. You are going to walk the dog is future. Your heart, which had begun to beat at 1,000,000 miles an hour, settled down. Still, though, you didn't pay attention to the lecture. All you could think about was that boy, the mean, abrasive, cocky boy. Maybe he wasn't as mean as you thought him to be, though. Even if he was, you sort of liked it. Him kicking you could come off as rude, but you appreciated it. Sometimes you didn't need sugar-coated comfort. Sometimes you needed someone to kick you. And that Bakuga did. And would most likely do again if you fell into another episode. The thought made you smile a little, and you knew Bakuga noticed that, if anything. Unfortunately, so did Ashido. She made little kissy faces at you from across the room and pointed towards Bakuga as if you didn't know that's who she was referencing. Shaking your head, you tried your best to pay attention, but by that point, the bell rang. Guess you weren't going to be the best student in the class. And you don't have to be. The person is not worth something as silly as a number, that voice inside you said. With a start, you noticed you could sense the molecular composition of things around you again. The thing was back. And so was your quirk. Many students groaned and stood up with a stretch. Jairu poked Kaminari with her earphone jack, and he jolted up in his seat. She laughed. Ashido came over to your seat, a bounce in each step, and squealed. However, before she could open her mouth to gossip, there was a firm grip on your forearm. In return, pain shot through your body. With a gasp, you tried to rip your arm away, but the grip didn't loosen. He had grabbed your left forearm, the one you. White-hot pain washed across you, and all the torment you had done to yourself the day before you started you came back to haunt you. Your quirk leapt forth and practically vibrated your very atoms. With a single thought, he could be dead. You and that thing knew that. But you and the thing restrained yourselves. Red eyes bore into your own. Bakuga tightened his grip, despite your pain, and tugged at you to follow him. Ashido flapped her hands beside her and wailed, "Wait, but I was going to talk with LN while we walked to lunch." Bakuga scowled. "She's eating lunch with me." Ashido's pained expression melted away like snow in the coming of spring. She then lit up. "You guys are in love." You sighed. "Why was your life like this?" Before any voice in your head could answer, Bakuga tugged you with him towards the lunchroom. Pulling you along, he gripped your arm harder and harder with each step. To your horror, you could see fresh blood seeping through into your school uniform. Bakuga, stop. He whipped around, gripping your forearm even harder. "Why?" "Because I'm hurting you." "I thought that was the point of you cutting yourself." "You want to hurt, huh?" The red of his eyes was practically a flame. It made your quirk ignite inside of you, as if he were pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. "How did you know?" you asked, trying to pull yourself away without activating your quirk. He gripped harder. "You wear sleeves in the hottest diamond part of summer, moron. And when I grabbed your arm, you were gasping in pain. Now your diamond arm is bleeding. I don't need to be Sherlock FNG Holmes to figure out that you cut yourself." You slapped a hand across his mouth, trying your hardest to ignore your quirk. "Stop announcing that to the whole world." Bakuga used his other hand to rip your hand off his face. Compared to his strength, your arms were spaghetti noodles. A part of you scolded yourself for letting yourself get so weak, for letting yourself rot away in your grief. However, Bakuga didn't give you much time to scold yourself before he did it himself. If you don't want me to announce it to the whole world, then stop me. You pulled away, aware of other students giving you glances as you walked. Most of Class 1A was still in the classroom, but a few students from outside your class walked by and gave you two weird looks. Bakuga didn't seem to care. Your quirk, however, did. It shook beneath your skin. "Let go of me," you said, hitting his arm. "Make me," he said. "Use your diamond quirk to get me off of you." Your quirk quivered, rearing its head within your skin. It scratched at your blood vessels, clawed at your skin. This body truly was a prison, specifically for that entity it wanted to be let out. With your quirk, you sensed students beginning to shuffle to the great red door. "Let go," you cried. More students came out of Class 1B and gave you strange looks. They murmured to each other quietly, and your quirk begged you to let go of it. Use your diamond quirk. Just before you could blow the boy to smithereens, there was a towering figure behind you. "Young Bakugu, now that I am here, you should let go of young LN." For a moment, Bakugu looked completely and totally stunned. You almost saw stars in his eyes before horror replaced them. He quickly replaced both expressions with a scowl. Looking to the ground and scoffing, he let go of you. Your classmates began to file out of the classroom, done talking and ready to eat lunch. They all froze when they saw All Might. There were gasps and shrieks. "I wasn't going to teach until after lunch, but I always have my eyes and ears open to distress. And now I am here earlier than expected." The class was so enthralled with All Might as well as the other students in the halls that no one noticed the blood on your uniform. It seeped across the gray of the fabric like blood had seeped into the gray of the barren wasteland of your not memories. Your quirk lit up beneath your skin, and when you looked up, you saw Bakugu attempting to sulk off. His hands were in his pockets, and he was hunched in shame as he walked off. You couldn't let him tell anyone about your self-harm. "Wait, Bakugu!" Running after him, you grabbed his shoulder. He stopped in the middle of the hallway and shot you a look. His eyes glossed over and read in the wrong places. "What?" he said with a scowl. All Might then appeared again, swiftly putting a hand on both your shoulders. He ushered the rest of the class to continue on to lunch and leave you guys alone. When all the other students had left, he turned to address both of you. Strangely, his blue cape flapped in a phantom breeze. He cleared his throat and spoke. "Young LN." He nodded to you. "Young Bakugu." He nodded to Blondie. "I am not sure what was going on before I arrived, but I advise you to treat each other with more respect. After all, that is what heroes are supposed to do. Treat others with respect and kindness, even if they don't show that to you." Bakugu peered up at him beneath a fierce scowl, his shoulders hunched and his head lowered. "You just looked at your feet. Once, when you were a kid, you had held great respect and admiration for All Might. Although, a part of you always hated him. Since you could remember, your life had been hell. Before your second papa, you had a terrible father. And no matter how much you begged for All Might, for anyone, no one came to save you. Even your mama had hated heroes, All Might especially. The memories washed over your brain uncontrollably, and you could do nothing but stare through All Might and into your past. The TV shone bright in the dark. All Might soared through the sky through the screen, like some sort of action book character. "Wow, Mama. I want to be just like him. One day, I'm going to be a great hero too." She scooped you up into her arms. "Now, Wyan, you don't need to be a hero." You blinked at her. "Why not? Do heroes ever come to save us?" You frowned. "No. This world is oversaturated with heroes that only ever save people on TV. They're more of celebrities than heroes. It's time we have a new sort, but not a hero or a villain. This world needs a, what was that character of yours?" Beaming, you threw your hands up while still in her grasp and said, "The great Hafizi." Your mama smiled. "Yes, Hafizi. This world doesn't need an All Might or any other hero. This world needs a Hafizi." You blinked, seeing All Might now standing before you. The sunlight from outside spilled through the windows in just the right direction to hit your eyes. It left you hardly able to see the great hero before you. Sometimes light shone so bright it blinded people, left them unable to see what was directly in front of them. Such juxtaposition. So, All Might said, I hope that clears things up, and from now on, you will be star students and heroes. But I must be off. With that, he was gone. There was nothing but a gust of wind left in his place, but that too was gone quickly. You blinked again, looking away from the windows. You had hardly heard anything he said. Instead, Hafizi, remembering your thoughts from during class, you pulled out your phone. What are you doing? Bakugu demanded. You didn't respond. Instead, you opened Google. What does Hafizi mean? In less than a second, you got results you didn't want to read. You nearly dropped your phone. There were explosions. What is it, dumbass? Without responding, you just stared. That thing inside you smiled like a cat would before pouncing on prey. You let your phone hang loosely in your hand, staring out off the grand windows of UA. Outside, there was a forest, and beyond that forest, a vast city. There were endless cars, endless lives, endless people. What had your mother meant all those years ago? What did she know that you didn't? What was the fate of that world outside, and why did it need a Hafizi? The phone was snatched from your hand, and Bakugu stared at the screen. What the hell is this? You lurched forward, snatching at your phone, but he pulled back and got outside of your reach. What is this? He repeated, waving your phone around beside him. His hand smoked dangerously, and you smelt burnt caramel seep into the air. Please, give me my phone back, you sighed. You were so tired. First you realized your quirk was most likely its own person, a god, actually. Then, you realized that name you had happily made up when you were a child was more ominous than you ever knew. Bakuga looked at the screen and read its contents aloud. Hafizi, meaning guardian, protector, or one who remembers preserves. He looked up at you. What the hell does that mean, and why are you freaking out about it? I just want you to remember, he had said. Then he told you to tell him the story you made up about Hafizi. And your mother. This world needs a Hafizi. What did all this mean? And what did it have to do with that person in your head? You began to breathe heavy, your chest rising and falling irregularly. However, there was a flick on your forehead. Dumps, Bakugu said, waving his hand around in your face. The smell of caramel was stronger than ever. What the hell is going on? Talk to me. With your entire body feeling like a lead weight, and your head feeling light and dizzy, you began to sway in place. Sleeves? Bakugu said. He reached a hand out, and when you stumbled, he grabbed you firmly with both hands. Hey breath, you idiot. The world spun before you, and your head felt like it was in the clouds. Hafizi, Papa, barren wastelands, one who remembers. The world grew foggy and unclear, your vision going in and out. Even Bakugu's voice seemed to be far away. Before you knew it, you were crumbling to the floor. When Bakugu heaved you up into his arms and carried you off, you began to see yourself from the third person. It was like how you saw your memories of the bad place, like how you saw all those collapsing buildings and Aizawa picking you up. You were completely out of control of your own body, a bystander watching as someone else walked around in your skin. But this time, you weren't sure who controlled the skin. Was it Hafizi? Was this another memory of the past? There was a brief moment of nothingness, and you thought maybe you had finally died. However, you woke up. You always woke up. There was a cold dampness on your forehead and the strong smell of caramel. Bleary-eyed and with a throbbing in your head, you sat up, groaning. There was sudden light polluting your eyes, and you tried to blink it out like one would blink out an eyelash. Vision returning, you saw Bakugu sitting on the bathroom floor, leaned against the door while watching you. You leapt up, and the wet napkins on your forehead fell off and landed on the floor with a splat. What happened? You looked around and saw not only stalls but urinals. It was also much grosser than the women's restroom. Why am I in the men's room? Bakugu scowled. You passed out. You looked at yourself in the mirror and instantly regretted it. The face in the mirror was definitely not yours. You weren't even sure whose it was, but it was not yours. That much was certain. Looking down at your hands, you found those, too, to be foreign. This was not your body. Who's Hafizi? The boy asked. The name hit you like a bullet, but rather than go straight through you, it stuck right in the middle of your heart. It was familiar. Much more familiar than this strange body. Who the F is Hafizi? Bakugu repeated, still slumped against the door. In his hand was your phone. Give that back, you said. You stepped forward with your fists clenched. Make me, he said, smirking. You did. Using your quirk, you pulled the phone to your hand in an instant. Bakuga's eyes were wide. You used your quirk. You shrugged. Yes, so. Standing up, he forced himself into your face. You hardly ever use your quirk. You scowled at him, confused. No. I use it all the time. Ask Shoto. Bakugu stared into your eyes as if looking for you inside of them. Am I even talking to the same person? You looked back into the mirror, into that face that was not yours. You looked at Bakugu. For a brief moment, you reveled in the power you felt stirring within you. It sat around you like a heavy cloud, and you could manipulate that cloud however you liked. Flexing your fingers, you closed your eyes and felt the power yawn within you like a sleepy cat waking from a deep slumber. It stretched, and with it, you outstretched your fingers, toying with the molecules around your fingers. You felt alive. No. Awake. Despite how awake you were, you didn't sense the flick before it happened upon your forehead. You opened your eyes to see Bakugu with his incriminating fingers right before your face. Hello. Did you hear me or are you deaf? I asked if you are even the same FNG person. You shrugged, smirking at his silly exasperation. Maybe. There were explosions. Maybe. What do you mean maybe? Sniffing, you not only smelled caramel but also urine and, unfortunately, semen from all over the bathroom. Gross, you said more to yourself. Why are we in the men's bathroom? Bakugu grabbed your shoulders and shook you. What do you mean maybe you're the same person? You pushed him off you, feeling your mood suddenly deflate. I mean I don't know. I never really know. I feel like I'm sometimes different people, but I don't know who those people are. Bakugu gestured towards the phone in your hand. Is Hafizi one of those people? With a scowl, you shoved it into your backpack's pocket. That's none of your business, you said, but he did bring up a good question. He crossed his hands in front of his chest. Ever since you showed up at school, you've acted weird, and now you're acting really weird. Earlier in class, you started breathing heavily like you had been right before we headed out for that DMN quirk assessment test. Then I find out you cut yourself, and then you start freaking out over whatever the hell Hafizi means. And then you go past the F out, and I have to haul your butt to the bathroom and save you. I think I deserve an answer. Remembering all about that, you were brought back to your current identity crisis. When you looked into the mirror, though, you were able to recognize yourself more, but the reflection was still foreign in a way. However, it was the face you were used to seeing, even if it wasn't the face you felt was yours. See, you can recognize a face in the mirror and it still be someone else's. Your head suddenly throbbed, and you narrowed your eyes, the bright lights on the ceiling of the bathroom worsening your headache. Hey, you okay? You squinted your eyes at Bakugu and saw genuine concern on his face. There was no longer a scowl. A laugh found its way to your throat. I didn't know you could be so nice. The scowl was back. I'm not nice. That made you laugh harder, worsening your headache. You stopped laughing and clutched your head, swaying as you did so with a groan. Sheet, I should have taken you to the nurse, he said, reaching out for you, probably not to comfort you but rather in case you passed out again. You blinked at him, shielding your eyes from the lights. Why didn't you? He scowled, clenching and unclenching his jaw. With his hands shoved in his pockets, Bakugu looked intently at the ground. Because I wanted you to give me information. And you couldn't do that from the nurse's office? He looked you in your eyes. If you won't even tell me who the F Hafizi is, then you sure as F wouldn't have told me with the nurse right there. You shrugged, face going red. True. Bakugu took a step towards you. Look, I'll take you to the nurse's office, but first, tell me something. Just one thing. Lips making a fine line, you said, about what exactly? His eyes twitched, and the smell of burnt caramel was once again in the air. About any of it. Looking back into the mirror, you began to notice the gross smudges on the glass. Did no one clean it? Or maybe guys were just that gross. You looked back at Bakugo and shifted on your feet. I don't like to use my power all that much because it's dangerous. I've hurt people by accident with it before. Then why did you just say you use it all the time? You blinked at him. I said that. Bakugo face palmed, sighed, then exploded. Are you stupid? Yeah, you just said that. You shook your head, remembering now. Oh, sorry. My memory is pretty bad sometimes. He sighed, walking over and slumping against the bathroom door again. Can you please tell me who Hafizi is? The boy looked so exhausted. You felt his exhaustion deep in your bones, in your soul. Ignoring that presence in your head that told you not to, you smiled the best you could. It's the name I always wanted to be called if I became a hero. I made it up when I was a kid. Bakugo opened his eyes, and the red in his irises was like a river of blood cutting a gray, barren wasteland in half as they tore through you. Looking you up and down, he seemed to soak you up, to know you better than you knew yourself. He huffed, looking towards the urinals rather than at you. Cool hero name. You beamed, a childlike part of you awakening. Throwing your hands up in front of your face, you said, "Really?" As a kid, I always imagined people screaming it in joy as I swooped in and saved them. Imagining the vision in your mind, you lost yourself in bliss only past dreams could give you. Bakugo smiled. Too caught up in your fantasies, you didn't notice it. Then his smile was gone. I thought you didn't care about being a hero. You didn't use your quirk throughout the whole goddamn quirk assessment test. You could have been expelled. You clearly don't give a f about becoming a hero. The fantasies fell apart like shattered glass. I used to care. Not anymore. Bakugo scowled. Why not? Stomach growling, you remembered what time it was. Wait, we're supposed to be at lunch right now, aren't we? Bakugo pushed himself off the door. Yeah, but you can't eat when you're unconscious. You crossed your arms over your chest. Well, I'm conscious now. And hungry. There was a tug at the corner of Bakugo's lips, and he looked you up and down. His gaze made you suddenly uncomfortable. Gripping the straps of your backpack, you looked at the bathroom tiles on the floor. They were white and grimy and you had been lying on those. You cringed at the thought. We should go now. Bakugo shook his head, his blonde spikes shaking with him. Do you still need to go to the nurse? Shaking your head, you still felt the same pressure and throbbing, but you didn't care to deal with it. No, I'm good. Let's go get some food. Just when you said that, the bell rang signaling the end of the lunch PRD. Damn it, you cried. Bakugo just glared at you, the wheels churning inside his head. Inside his eyes, you could see a million questions, but you had already answered more questions than you would have liked to. You went to open the bathroom door, but there was a caramel-scented hand blocking you from exiting. Glaring at him, you silently told him to move. He didn't. Instead, he scowled at you. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. You clenched your jaw. Why do I feel like that offer is less out of kindness and more just so you can figure me out? There was a smile, a maniacal one like after he threw the softball. Gotta get to number one somehow, and I can't beat someone if I don't understand their full extent of power and what they can do. He leaned in close to you, seeming to have a personality change of his own, and whispered, "And you, sleeves, are a mystery. One I'll figure out somehow. And then I'll surpass you. I'll leave you in my dust." At that, he had his hands in his pockets and was wrenching open the door. He left you standing alone in the men's restroom. You were stuck like a deer in headlights. Had that just happened? You shook your head and left before any guy walked in to find you standing. They're stunned. The rest of the day was semi-normal. You had to change into a backup uniform you had in your backpack in case of emergencies. There were more boring classes and more arguments in your head. However, Bakugo didn't talk to you. He hardly even looked in your direction. And that entity in your head was absent, too, along with your quirk again. You were too exhausted to think about it too much, and you definitely didn't have the mental capacity to try to understand what Hafizi meant and why it mattered. Oh shit. You still had to do the hero training part of the day. And you had homework. College was not for the mentally ill. When All Might theatrically barged into the room to announce you were doing combat training, you had the strongest urge to shoot yourself. This fight was not going to be a good one. And on top of it, your quirk had left with that strange entity. What a great way to start your first real day of UA. 11 years ago. It had been several months since you had met your new papa, and you still were not sure how to feel about him. He was definitely better than your original papa. However, this new papa was questionable. He made you uncomfortable and brought up things like changing you or making you remember. It confused you, but you kept that to yourself. Despite the confusion, you were content in a way. It was better than home. Although, it wasn't what you would have wanted. It was cold and empty and gray. That was all you began to feel in return. You did never-ending tasks like crushing cans with your quirk and moving things around with your mind. Sometimes Papa demanded even more difficult tasks such as moving specific particles, reading to him the elements you saw in your mind, or even telepathically communicating with others. You had this strange ability to peer into others' minds and speak. It didn't seem connected to your atomic manipulation, but for some reason, you could do it. Papa did not explain it, and you did not ask. You just did it when he asked you to. When you peered into someone's mind, you felt you could walk around in it, see their memories and thoughts. It was strange. Sometimes, you found you could even stand like a ghost among others in faraway locations. Papa had you observe things going on overhead and report back to him. We were located deep underground in a series of tunnels, so this task was valuable. There was never any light other than the artificial white ones, and there was nothing to cheer up the concrete tunnels save for the lonely friend you made. Tomura Shigaraki. You liked him. He was like you. He was different, strange. Tomura was in no way meant for this world. Apparently, he had killed his whole family, and your new papa, being the kind man he was, saved him. In a way, he had saved you too. Your mama and papa stayed home, far from you. Although you missed your mama, you were glad to be away from home. Home was hell. Home was where the bad papa did bad things to you, and mama never did anything to stop it. You would tell her time and time again, but she would pretend to not hear you. Sometimes she even saw him do bad things to you, but still, she would do nothing. Instead, she would stand there like a statue, and you would wonder if she was even alive. She was. She just pretended not to be. Now you were away from all of that. Your new papa had saved you. You were free. And so was Tomura. Tomura had skin problems, though, and papa never did anything to help him. You didn't understand why papa wouldn't help him with his scratching, but whenever papa wasn't around, you would. Do you need any help? You asked as Tomura writhed on the floor, scratching himself until there was blood coating his fingernails. Filth, he cried out. It's all over me. It burns. It itches. You tried to help scratch his arms for him, but he batted you away. Tears ran down his face like parallel rivers and soaked his t-shirt. Fiddling with your fingers, you tried to smile. I itch too. I feel like I'm dirty because of my other papa. Sometimes I feel so filthy, I want to rip my skin off. Did your papa dirty your skin too? Tomura began to scream a blood-curdling scream. Don't talk about my father. He scratched more ferociously. He cried, screamed, and he even began to laugh. His neck became a bloody mess. Not knowing what to do, you remembered those times you would get lost in thoughts about what your papa did to you at night or as punishment. You would hit yourself in the head and scratch the skin off your body, just like Tomura. Your mama would have to hold you down and restrain your hands until you calmed down. So, you did that with Tomura. You restrained him and held his bloody hands away from his neck. He tried to use his quirk on you, but you used your quirk to hold his hands in place to keep him from touching you. Tomura screamed and screamed and screamed until he couldn't scream anymore. Then, after a few minutes, he relaxed. And then began to sob. I hate my father. I hate him and my whole useless family who never did anything to stop him from hurting me. I hate him. I hate them. I hate everyone and everything, he screamed while in your hold. You stroked his shaggy black hair, just like your mother would with you. I understand. I hate people too. I hate my papa, and I hate the heroes that never came to save me from him. Sometimes I even hate my mama for not being my hero too. He cried harder. No, you don't understand. No one does. No one gets it. Heroes don't get it. Why did heroes never save me? Why did no one save me? What is wrong with me? Holding him tightly, you rocked him back and forth. You were younger than him by a few years, but you felt motherly towards him. He clearly needed a mother. Papa saved you. He cares. He doesn't care. No one does. He's just using me. And he's using you too. You paused your rocking. Maybe. But at least this is better than how life used to be. It's not, he screamed. Life is hell no matter where you go. I hate life. I want to kill it just like I killed my family. One day I will. One day I'll turn the whole world to ash. Turn the world to ash. You felt you had seen that before. You shook the thought away. You stroked his hair once more. Sometimes I want to kill my family too. My papa hurts me. My mama never does anything to stop him. She's a good mama though, but she never keeps papa from doing bad things. Tamura began to writhe again, straining in your arms. His sneakers skidded across the gray, concrete floor and kicked at your legs. Then what? Don't you kill them? He screamed while twisting in your arms, his hands still held firm and stiff with your quirk. Why don't you kill everyone? We could do it together. Blinking at him, you found you couldn't respond. This cold, gray, empty environment had seeped into your heart, and you had nothing to say in return. You just silently let him rage until he tired himself out and fell asleep. But despite him falling asleep, you still thought about what he said. Why don't you just kill them? You had the power to. Your new papa would probably encourage it. So why not? But mama was good. You shook your head and continued to slide Tamura's hair. Your mama was a good mama. You didn't want her to die. Present day. Combat training. Of all the things on your bingo card, that was certainly not one of them. You did not want to fight. You didn't even want to move, much less fight. But alas, you were in a hero school, the best hero school out there. So you would have to fight. As you got dressed into your hero costume, that person stirred beneath your skin. It was excited. However, you were certainly not letting that thing fight. Oh, a high-pitched voice from behind you squealed. You turned around and saw the pink girl, Ashido, bounding towards you with little hops. Tightly fitted to her body, Ashido wore a strange blue and purple outfit with a fur vest over it. It reminded you of a child's splatter paint, the canvas having been adorned with fur for no apparent reason other than for simple-minded amusement which only human beings could muster. What am I thinking? You thought to yourself. That must have been that thing in your head. She stopped in front of you with a singular bounce and grinned. Your outfit looks so good, she squealed. Her over-enthusiastic spirit caused a pink lock of hair to fall in front of her face. Ashido blew it, crossing her eyes as she looked at it. Her attempts were to no avail, and she had to resort to using her hands to brush it out of her face. Once the hair was successfully pushed out of the way of her vision, she smiled again at you and said, "Is it designed to fit your quirk or something?" The rest of the girls in the locker room had finished putting their costumes on and began to crowd around you, seeing this opportunity as some sort of social event. You had purposefully been isolating yourself in the corner of the locker room to be away from them, not just because you disliked being around other people but also because the concept of changing clothes in front of other people made your skin crawl. There was a stirring beneath your skin, and it was something that couldn't be credited to your power or that entity. No, it was the itch. The itch of filth. Now, though, all the girls stood around you and were attentive. Luckily, you were done changing. The itching, however, did not go away. You brushed the thoughts and urges out of your mind and attempted to smile at the girls. Jairu, the girl with the headphone jacks on her earlobes, nodded with approval. You look super cool. The girl with the high ponytail and excess amounts of skin showing you hadn't caught her name put a hand on her hip. Your costume is very practical. You looked at yourself. It was basically all just black and gray. You wore black cargo pants, black boots, and a gray shirt. The shirt was a little too tight for your liking and showed way too much of your body, but the designers had insisted on it. You didn't have the effort to argue, so you just let them do what they wanted. However, you still had the black sleeves covering your forearms, and although it was to hide your bad habits, it completed the look in a satisfactory way. Despite the tightness of the shirt, you actually liked your costume. It was also a relief that the pants weren't tight. That was something you couldn't tolerate. The other pink girl, Not naturally pink but rather in material and fabric. You were terrible at names beamed at you. Putting her bald hands up beside her face, she said, "You totally look like some sort of super spy or something. It's so cool." A girl that was akin to a frog made an audible rib-bit noise. "All that's missing is a belt with weapons." There was another rib-bit, and she put a finger to her chin. "And maybe thigh holsters. It would fit your look." Jair, why was that one of the only names you could remember? Crossed her hands across her chest. She nodded her head. "That would be so rad." You raised an eyebrow. She must have been into punk music. After all, she was wearing black pants and a ripped t-shirt with a black leather jacket over it. Jair looked the type to be into punk music. Ashido suddenly clapped her hands together and jumped up and down. "OMG! I have an idea. We should all go around in a circle and introduce ourselves. We should say our names, something we like to do, and why we're at UA." The girls murmured their agreements. You went along with it. Ashido went first. "My name is Mina Ashido. I like dancing, specifically hip-hop, and I am going to UA because I want to help people." There was an unspoken rule the girls seemed to understand, which was that this order would move clockwise. The next to speak in this clock-like rotation was Jairu. She fiddled with her earphone jacks and looked to the ground. "Oh, I am Kyoka Jair. I like music, and I am here because, like Ashido said, I want to help people." Next was the frog-like girl. "Ribbit. My name is Tsuyu Azui, but you can just call me Tsu. I like swimming a lot. I also am here because I want to use my powers for good and save people, specifically in watery areas." All the girls nodded their approval with smiles and bright eyes. Then they turned to you. Clearing your throat, you shifted in place. You grasped your left wrist, but when Jairu's eyes darted to your forearm, you quickly let go of it. You cleared your throat again. "Hi. My name is YNLN. For the life of you, you couldn't think of anything you liked to do. You thought of reading and listening to music, but that wasn't really fun. It was more of something you did to pass time and to stave off the insanity inside your head. You decided, though, those activities were the closest things you came to enjoying in this gray, barren wasteland of a world. I like to read and listen to music." Jairu perked up when you mentioned music. "Oh yeah. I noticed you wear headphones a lot before and after class. What do you like to listen to?" Your face got red. "I like to listen to basically anything." "But like, what's your favorite?" You really didn't have a favorite. Everything about you, personality, desires, way of speech, music taste, everything seemed to change by the hour. Shrugging, you said, "I don't really have a favorite." Jaira looked disappointed, the twirling of her earphone jacks growing slower. "Oh," she said. Then she perked up. "Well, I'm going to make you a playlist. Would you like that?" You smiled at her and tried to straighten your posture. "Yeah, sure." Ashido began to bounce up and down again. "Wait, you didn't say why you're at UA?" Your smile fell. "Oh, well, I don't want to be here. I'm just here because the guy who adopted me made me." All the smiles dropped like flies exposed to toxic air. Ashido stopped bouncing in place. There was silence. One of them coughed. Your face burned, and you regretted having ever opened your mouth. "That's kinda messed up, dude," Jairu said, finally breaking the tension. Ashido leaned forward and got in your face. "What would you want to do if you weren't forced to be at UA?" The girl with very little clothing interjected. "Wait, you're 18, aren't you?" You nodded your head up and down. "Then you should be able to decide where you go to school. Your father has no right to control where you go." You sighed, gripping your left forearm and leaning against the lockers. "I don't really care to oppose him. If it were up to me, well, I don't really care, so I didn't bother to argue with him." They all stared at you. You knew if Bakugo were here, he'd probably yell at you. It was likely the word pushover or walking doormat would be in those screams too. That was what you were, anyway. Ashido's mouth hung open. "But you have to have something you want to do with your life." You looked around at the aspiring heroes, all of them decked out in bright colors. You looked at yourself in your gray and black. You looked into Ashido's eyes, into the burnt gold which swam in a sea of black nothingness. Sighing, you said, "I don't really care." She pouted, pushing her lips out like a child and crossing her arms over her chest. Well, that's no good. The girl's face suddenly lit up. Wait, I know. You should come dance with me one afternoon. Maybe you're secretly a dance star, and you just have yet to discover it. Trying to give her the best smile you could manage, you said, maybe. The girl with little clothing then saved you. Well, my name is Momo Yayarozu, and I like exquisite tea and classical music. I am also here at UA because I want to honor my family's name and become a hero the citizens of Japan can look up to. Yayarozu looked off into the adjacent wall as if she could see her future inside of it. The girl clothed all in pink beamed and threw her hands up beside her. My name is Achiko Uraraka, and I love to help people. There was then a pause. She scratched her head, her smile faltering. And, well, I'm here to make money. Uraraka said that as if that wasn't a perfectly good reason to become a hero. She threw her hands up and waved them around erratically. But I just need the money to help my parents. It's not that I'm greedy. I just want to make sure my parents can live good lives. The girls all reassured her that that was a perfectly admirable reason to become a hero and that she was fine. You just stared at her, the black nothingness of Ishido's eyes finding their way into your soul. There wasn't much time to think about it, though, because Jiru then looked at the clock on the wall and informed everyone that it was time to go. It was time for combat training. When you made your way out to ground beta, an entire makeshift city stretched before you. There were small stores, tall buildings, and even whole parking decks there. Where did UA even get the money for this type of sheet? As you scanned your surroundings, the sun beating down on your shoulders, you felt a presence, a small life form creeping up behind you. It made its way towards your rear, and that itchiness beneath your skin exploded, and in turn, so did that entity. However, before the thing could touch you and cause catastrophic damage to himself and everyone around, there was a familiar voice ringing through the air. Turning around, you saw Bakugu grab hold of the short, purple guy's outstretched hand. He yanked it and nearly caused the boy to fall flat on his face, but Bakugu held firm to his hand. The guy with strange purple ball on his head whimpered, "Please, don't hurt me." Bakugu exploded. Maybe you should have thought about that before you tried to touch some girls but without her permission. He twisted the boy's arm, and he began to scream. You don't deserve to be at UA. Someone else more heroic should have taken your demon's spot. The boy began to cry, and Bakugu proceeded to call him a wimp whose ball hadn't dropped yet. You smiled. The entire rest of the class watched with strange fascination. Bakugu, although he was being an but, was also being nice in a way. Midoriya stared wide-eyed at the explosive boy. Speaking of Midoriya, his costume was giving you second-hand embarrassment. It was clearly an attempt to be like All Might, but it failed miserably. It was like he blended Gawain and the Green Knight with All Might and with the Easter Bunny. It was not a good look. Bakugu, however. He still stood growling at the boy with grapes on his head. Baku wore a tight-fitted black tank top of sorts with cargo pants, a belt to hold grenades, and he had large, green gauntlets on his forearms. They looked so clunky and big you weren't sure how he even moved his arms at all. It probably would have taken all your strength just to pick one of them up. You hated how weak that made you, but you shrugged off your feelings. Emotions were not tolerable when combat training was about to start. Bakugu seemed to notice your staring and let go of the pervert. Grape Boy scampered off like a rat and hid behind the boy with a lightning bolt in his hair. Bakuga didn't pay attention to him. Instead, he looked you up and down. Maybe it was your imagination, but you were pretty sure under the black mask that went around his eyes and did nothing to conceal his identity in any way his cheeks got red. You also shrugged that off with your emotions. It was probably just a hallucination, and you were not a stranger to those unfortunately. Then he began to walk over to you, his gauntlets practically pulling his arms with him. Unable to speak, you noticed the little makeshift flames which jutted out from his blonde tufts of hair. He also wore an entire cinder block on his shoulders, as if the gauntlets weren't heavy enough. The boy seemed to prefer to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. You didn't want to, and you certainly made no effort to add weight to your costume, but somehow, you wore that weight anyways. And it crushed you, left you weak and helpless. Bakugu, though, seemed to wear all that weight with ease, like it was no big deal to carry rough cinder blocks around his neck. Noticing the way you stared, he smirked. Like what you see, sleeves? You shook your head and looked at your boots. They were very shiny and black. Bakugu stopped in front of you and put his hands on his hips. You looked up at him. Why is he so cunty? A voice in your head thought. Ignoring that, you blinked at him. However, you were unable to respond. It wasn't that you were flustered, but the sharp nothingness had taken hold after that whole episode you had with Bakugo earlier in the day. It left you with no creative responses, so you just stared instead. He smirked harder, his cheeks definitely red. Ashido did not fail to notice this. Oh, gosh, she said, appearing beside you. You guys are a couple. I can just feel the tension between you two. She began to squeal. Bakugu started to chuckle to himself until he realized what Ashido had said. Wait, what? Shut it, you pink alien. We aren't a goddamn couple. This just made Ashido giggle. She whipped out her phone, took a quick photo of Bakugu screaming, and then dashed off, screaming, I'm going to show you this picture when you guys officially start dating, and I'll remind you of what you said. He tried to dash off to catch her, but just then, All Might showed up. That man had super speed, but still somehow managed to show up late to class. He was probably just busy, but something about it grated on your temper. Your mama had been right to say this world didn't need heroes. The age for them had passed, and evil prevailed. Now, the world needed someone much more ruthless and more efficient than All Might. Hafizi grinned like a cat in the back of your head, and you could feel her will practically scratching beneath your skin, saying, if you just let me out. Shaking the thoughts from your head, you tried to pay attention to what All Might was saying but couldn't bring yourself to. You were vaguely aware of the class shouting a plus ultra or something, but you weren't enthusiastic like that. Instead, you scanned the boys' costumes over. You hadn't taken much notice of them until now and decided to use All Might's speech to do just that. They were, for the most part, ugly. Shoto's costume was nearly as bad as Midoriya's, it being half ice and half a regular white suit. It was hideous. You should have consulted with him about his hero costume before he submitted it a few months back. But it was too late. The rest of the boys' outfits were not as bad but still iffy. The only ones you really approved of was Bakugu, that was probably obvious Ida, and Kirishima. Ida wore a full-body suit of armor of some sort. It wasn't necessarily practical or attractive, but it looked like what people expect heroes to be. Kirishima's, on the other hand, was basically just red pants and fabric which hung loosely over his toned chest. And toned it was. He was shredded. Out of the corner of your eye, you caught Bakugu narrowing his eyes at you. You quickly snapped your attention back to All Might, but you were still thinking about glistening abs and pecs. Bakugu was pretty shredded too, though. His shoulders were huge, especially in proportion to his tiny, feminine waist. Bakugu would not like it if you said that to his face, but it was true. He had quite the hourglass figure, and his arms were so lean. You glanced over at him to find him still glaring at you, and you instantly regretted it. You looked towards All Might. There was a nudge at your side, and you saw Shoto smirking. You totally like Bakugu. You startled. Whispering, you said, No, I don't. I was just admiring his costume. Shoto chuckled, and although Bakugu was facing All Might, you could tell he was straining his ears to hear what you two were talking about. All Might then pulled out a box. This finally got your attention. You will all be sorted into teams of two, either on the hero side or the villain side, depending on what card you pull from this box. The class shuffled forwards to get their cards, and when you finally got yours, your heart dropped. Looking hopelessly to the sky and the gods you hoped were up there, you saw birds glide through the cloudless sky. They were so free, so careless, so unlike you at the moment. You were going to be fighting Shoto. You would be on the villain team with the guy with a tail. His name was apparently Ojiro. However, that wasn't the problem. The problem was that Shoto was going to try to force you to fight him with your quirk. You gripped your card in your hand so hard it began to crumple. Shoto was going to do everything in his power to get you to use your power. You two had spent years sparring together, and he knew just which buttons to press to get you to let loose your quirk. Although you were quite good at evading him, he always found a way to get under your skin just enough to force you to fight. However, Today was different. You had just found that entity in your head, Hafizi. It was safe to say, it didn't take much to get under her skin and set her off. You might have just met her, but she had always been there since you could remember. You just hadn't realized it was a person. It was always your quirk or your anger issues or that violent side of you. It was that itch beneath your skin, the itch that scratched and begged to be let out. But now you knew, it was a person. And it was not just a person. It was Hafizi. With a loud blow of a whistle, the training started. You were in a really shitty mood. The day had already been a shit show with this strange entity appearing in your head, but now you were having to watch other people fight each other whilst you waited for your doom. Standing amongst the other students in all might, you watched Midoriya and Bakugo nearly kill each other. As much as you felt bad for Midoriya and hated how cruel Bakugo was being, you sort of saw yourself in Bakugo. There was nothing heroic about you. You didn't bully people. There had never really been anyone in your life to bully. Still, though, you were mean. You hated people, wished they would never smile again, and sometimes you even wanted to demolish this perfectly polished society and all the evil which festered beneath it. That itch sweltered inside of your skin, and you felt the need to scratch. Looking around at your classmates, you restrained yourself. They all stood watching the fight with wide eyes and clenched fists. It was clear they were eager to go next, and they were worried about Midoriya. Someone even dared to call Bakugo a villain. You sighed. They had yet to meet you on your bad days. Watching Bakugo blast Midoriya in the chest, you felt your stomach tie itself into knots. All Might talked into some sort of microphone and shouted at Bakugo to stop. He didn't. Bakugo just kept tormenting Midoriya. It was so much like you, the mean part at least. Actually, you could be much crueler. That was how Papa had taught you to be. He encouraged it, molded it into what it now was. Bakugo was mild compared to what you'd been. You wanted to say the past was all because of Papa, because he had manipulated you and coerced you, but you knew otherwise. You had wanted to be a villain, to be evil. Part of you still wanted that. Bakugo and Midoriya's fight ended up in Bakugo nearly destroying the building with a blast from his gauntlet and Midoriya finishing off the job by using his quirk to blow a gigantic hole through the entire building. Somehow, Midoriya and Uraraka won after this. Honestly, none of them should have won. You would do better than that. Not using your quirk. You were going to win in seconds. You would annihilate and leave the class speechless. Multiple students went before you, but the whole time, rather than thinking about the fight, all you could concentrate on was Bakugo. He sat in the back of the crowd and kept his head low. Occasionally, his shoulders would shake. It was hard to tell, though, because the lighting was bad. We were in a small building on ground beta with hardly any lighting other than the big screens which showed the students fighting. In the dim light, you could have sworn you saw a few tears on his cheeks. You definitely smelled a stronger caramel scent near him, but that could have just been from his sweat after exerting himself so much. However, you couldn't watch him for too long. You didn't want him to actually think you liked him. You didn't like him. Bakugo was just interesting. After an agonizing amount of rounds where students gasped in awe and cheered on their classmates, it was your turn. You gave Shoto a smirk, and he furrowed his brows. His eyes clearly held many questions, but you ignored them. You would answer questions after you destroyed him. Your role as a villain fit your mood. There would be no act happening today. Standing next to Ojiro, you stretched your fingers out beside you. Ojiro smiled at you. So, do you have a plan? You smiled back. Yeah. Just wait here and guard the weapon while I deal with Shoto and his partner. Although you didn't know it, Shoto had the exact same plan. You could have guessed that, though, considering how cocky he was. Ojiro's smile fell. Oh. He had probably wanted to fight more, and he most likely didn't trust you to win after you had barely used your quirk at the quirk assessment test. But you would win. There was no doubt in your mind. Ignoring Ojiro's disappointment, you turned your back on him and knocked on the missile. There was a loud, echoing noise. It must have been hollow. Using your quirk, you felt the lack of molecules inside of it. It was nothing but loose gas particles within. You were aware Ojiro was watching you, but you didn't care. You headed towards the windows of the building. The entire thing was concrete, so much like your old home. However, it was above ground rather than below. Placing your hands on the window sills, You looked out at the makeshift city. It was entirely vacant of people other than the class. It made that itch inside you grow. You could destroy the whole thing and have few casualties. It would be a nice release of emotions, a nice outlet. However, that would probably get you expelled. Not that you cared, but Endeavor would whoop your butt if you did, and that was not on your bingo card. The wind blew a few strands of your hair into your face, but you didn't bother pushing them back into place. Instead, you continued to overlook the city. The blue sky, the birds, the abandoned buildings. Your quirk yawned inside of you as if awakening from a deep slumber. Turning around, you smirked at Ojiro. His tail swung back and forth behind him. Just stay here. If anyone manages to get into this room, knock them out or capture them with the tape, you said while heading out the door. Okay, he said with reluctance, but you were already gone. With your quirk, you could feel a life form, a cocky, autistic life form, headed up the stairs and winding through the passageways. The other life forms stood at the main entrance to the building. Shoto clearly had the same plan in mind as you did. Of course he did. You would still win though. He was no match against you. Following the molecules you felt coming closer, you descended the levels, passing window after window. Outside an opportunity for destruction laid, one far worse than Bakugu and Midoriya's destruction. You wouldn't go that far though. You passed the windows, winding through the concrete passageways similar to that of your old home. The only difference was the windows and the sunlight which shone through them. However, despite the light, it still instilled an even greater itch inside of you, one that was slowly bursting from your skin and taking shape. The bars of the prison which confined you were bending, and you felt light and weightless as you walked. Power swelled within you, and you willingly gave yourself up to it. A wicked smile began to creep across your face. Shoto was not far now. You could feel his molecular makeup getting closer. Window after window. He was just 2 floors beneath you and down the hall to the right. You grinned even more, eyes wide with maniacal glee, and you began to run. Fingers outstretched beside you, you descended the 2 floors. You made no sound as you did so. You didn't even have to turn the corner before Shoto was upon you. As expected, there was a large pillar of ice rocketing towards you, but that was nothing. With a flick of the wrist, it was nothing but gas. He kept shooting ice at you, neglecting his fire altogether, the hypocrite. However, turning his ice to gas was easier than breathing. You couldn't even see him through the thick sheets of ice he was throwing at you. Part of you wondered if that was his strategy, but he should know by now that you didn't need eyes to see. With half a thought, you took the oxygen from his lungs. The ice kept coming, but it wouldn't for much longer. You felt his heart and his desperate gasps for air with your quirk. Yawning, you put a hand to your hip and waited. The ice pillars grew less intense, and his heart slowed until you felt the consciousness begin to flutter from his body. Soon, there was no ice, and you could see him clearly. Shoto stumbled in place, one hand reaching at his throat and another attempting to shoot ice at you. His red and white hair fell into his eyes, and before long, his consciousness left him altogether. Shoto fell face first into the ground. However, you weren't that mean. You caught him with your quirk before he hit the ground and broke his nose. Walking up to him and flipped him gently on his back. His breaths came more easily now, and his chest rose and fell steadily. Sensing the other life form at the door, you remembered your mission. The life form's heart was racing, and he was beginning to get antsy. He wouldn't be antsy for long. Following the winding passageways to the spiral steps in the center of the building, you leapt into the center of the spiral. It sort of reminded you of a catabasis, a spiral descent to Tartarus. That thought made you cackle a little as gravity pulled you straight down. The rows of stairs flew by, and the concrete slab below came rapidly closer. Before you hit the ground, you used your quirk to send a large gust of wind upwards, and for a moment you were hovering in a wind tunnel. Good thing you didn't have a skirt like UA mandated you wear during the day. Releasing the wind, you dropped gently to the floor. However, the large gust of wind had made a loud whooshing noise and alerted Shoji of your presence on the ground floor. Feeling the molecules sprinting towards you without even getting a look at him, you removed all the oxygen from the first floor of the building besides, of course, where you were standing. Shoji had walked into a death trap. Although, you weren't going to bring him death. You were in a hero school after all. Feeling him writhe and claw at his neck with all 6 of his hands, you let his heart slow until the consciousness left Shoji's body. You heard him slump to the floor from your right, and with that, All Might screamed, "The villains win!" And that was that. When you walked back into the room full of students, there was a loud explosion of chatter. You didn't care to interact with it, though. Many people tried to talk to you or ask questions, but you shut it out. Instead, you went and stood by Shoto, wishing you had your headphones with you. Shoto had woken up shortly after the round was won. Rubbing his head, he mumbled, "Was suffocating me really necessary?" You smirked at him and shrugged your shoulders. It was a fast way to get you captured. Shoto smiled for a second, but then it was gone. Why did you suddenly decide to use your quirk? You pretended to not hear him and clutched at your ears. "It's so loud in here with all this talking." "What did you say?" He sighed, giving up and looking at the rest of the students who were now chatting amongst each other about your performance since you refused to answer any questions or talk. His brown and blue heterochromic eyes flitted back and forth between the students until they landed on Bakugo. Shoto pointed towards him and was about to say something, but then All Might shouted out. "That was magnificent!" he cried. "Well done, villains. And a good effort on the hero's part, too." The class stared in awe at him, the giant of a man's voice echoing off the concrete walls. Midoriya's eyes gleamed and held sparkles in them. He was definitely a fanboy. All Might raised a mighty fist in the air and then brought it down. "It is time to pick a VIP for the round." Yaoyorozu threw her hand up. Before All Might could call on her, she began to spew out facts. "Sir, Ojiro is the VIP." You scowled at her and crossed your hands over your chest. Yaoyorozu continued, explaining herself. Shoto was too reckless in dashing off on his own and leaving his teammate behind. There was no teamwork shown at all. Shoji also did not try to help at all until after Shoto was unconscious. Also, YN was reckless as well. Although she was efficient in knocking out her opponents, she left Shoto completely unwatched while going off the fight Shoji. In that time, he could have woken up and taken the weapon while YN was away from it. Meanwhile, Ojiro remained at the site of the weapon and continued to vigilantly protect it while YN went to handle the villains, however recklessly so. When she was done, everyone stared at her as they had done every time she opened her mouth to explain who the VIP was. This girl clearly had an eye on her. But you had to argue your case. Shoto was not going to wake up before you captured Shoji. You had done that same thing before and knew you had enough time to pursue Shoji. You also knew knocking out Shoji would be quick and easy, so you hadn't been that reckless. However, All Might thought otherwise. "Right you are, young Yaoyorozu. You kept your mouth shut." Arguing with All Might was not something you were in the mood for. All Might turned to you, and in the sea of black nothingness which was within his eyes, you saw his piercing blue irises fix on you. It was startling the way he was smiling at you. His eyes held horror stories, but he still smiled. The mouth and the eyes didn't match. His entire face didn't match his eyes. Clearly, All Might wasn't as cheerful as he made himself out to be. "You did a wonderful job, YN. You had a solid plan, were efficient in executing it, but my only criticism is that you should never leave an enemy unattended like you did with young Shoto. Other than that, excellent job," he said with his hands on his hips, his cape still billowing in a phantom breeze. "You fought the urge to roll your eyes at the #1 hero." All Might went on to explain the others' performances, explaining what they did wrong and right. However, while Shoto was listening and looking towards All Might, you finally noticed what he had been pointing towards before All Might's lecture. Bakugo was crying. The boy was trying to hide it by lowering his head, but you could clearly see his shoulders shaking. Occasionally, he even wiped his eyes. You wanted to run to him and ask if everything was okay, but clearly, everything was not. Okay. Thinking back to how you handled Tamura, you knew asking if things were all right only made him angrier. It was simply hugging him that made him feel better. The same went for Shoto when he was upset. "Maybe after classes are over, I should go give Bakugo a hug?" You thought as you stared at him. At the time, you did not know that most people did not like uninvited hugs, especially from people they just met. All you had ever known was Tamura and Shoto, though, So how were you supposed to know that? While All Might lectured on, you foolishly decided you would give the explosively angry boy a hug. After class, you continued to ignore the rest of the class while packing up your stuff. They eventually got the message that you wanted to be left alone and quit pestering you. With everything thrown into your backpack, you zipped it up and slung it over your shoulders. The rest of the students bustled about, talking about how exciting the first day of hero training had been, but when you looked around, those blonde spikes of hair were nowhere in sight. Bakugu had already left. Shoto smiled. I assume you are looking for Bakugu. He clutched the straps of his backpack and stood away from the rest of the students. Instead, he stood there with you. You suddenly felt bad. Shoto had been encouraging you to leave his side and make friends, but you had refused. Now, he stood here with you, away from the bustling chatter to the left of the room. You frowned, but you didn't have time to bring up socializing with him. Bakugu might still be on campus. Pushing past Shoto, you said, "Hold on. Talk later," and sprinted off towards the stairwell. You ran down the hallway. Ito would have killed you if he had seen you, and bounded down the stairs until you were at the entrance of UA. There you saw Bakugu halfway to the school's defensive walls and the arches which cut them in half. Bakugu was sullen, walking with his pants loose and his back hunched. You raced after him, but he didn't stop until you were a few feet away from him. When he stopped, so did you. There was silence. Without turning, he growled, "What do you want?" You clenched your fists and watched his shoulders rise and fall with his exasperated breathing. The sun was still high in the sky, and the bright sunlight seemed to mock the two of you with its good cheer. There were sniffles. "Are you okay?" you asked by reflex. Damn it. You had told yourself to not say that. He whipped around at you, and now you could clearly see the tears on his face and the red of his nose and eyes. "I'm fine. Leave me alone." You clutched at the loose straps of your backpack tight and stared at him. Bakugu turned back around and continued to stomp off towards the exit, but then you remembered your original goal, the hug. Running forward, you grabbed Bakugu's arm and tried to spin him around, but he immediately took that as an attack. And why wouldn't he? You would have too. Gods, you were bad at comforting people. He pulled his arm out of your grasp and moved a hand into your chest, but there was no explosion. Your atoms vibrated, and a shaking violence ran beneath your skin. Hafizi smirked at you from inside your head. Bakugu looked at you with a puzzled expression. All he had done was move a palm into your chest. His hand rested there, right on your sternum. Beneath his palm, Bakugu could probably feel the way your heart drummed against your chest. You could feel his too. With your quirk, you could sense his heart hammering far too quickly. That wasn't what you paid attention to though. You noticed how warm his hand was. That was probably how he caused the explosions. However, he couldn't cause an explosion if the nitroglycerin wasn't there to combust. Hafizi had taken the compound from his skin and let it rest in the air far from him. Bakugu stared at his hand on your chest, and for a moment there was silence. He just stared at the hand and then slowly removed it. Looking at the palm of his hand, he said, "How? What the hell is your demon quirk?" You shrugged, pulling your lips into a fine line. Where his hand had rested now tingled with having been touched. "I move atoms," you said. You played with the straps of your backpack, looking down at your clunky uniform shoes. There was a breeze and you looked up to see Bakugu's shoulders shaking even more. Fresh tears fell, and he wiped them away before skinning them all in and looking directly into your eyes. He planted himself firmly and scowled. "I don't care how DMN strong you or your quirk is. I don't care how strong Deku gets or anyone else. I'll surpass you all. I'll be number one no matter what. I'll never lose a fight again. I'll be so strong that I'll crush anyone who tries to F with me," he shouted. With one last sniffle and wipe of his eyes, Bakugu turned and walked off. You were left stunned. You didn't even know what to think of that. You had no words. Suddenly, Midoriya ran up beside you. He still had his ugly uniform on, one that Bakugu had thankfully destroyed much off, and his arm was in a sling. The boy must have just woken up from the medical center and dashed here. He bent over and clutched his knee with his non-injured hand. "Between pants," he asked, "can you give me a moment with Kaken?" Looking off towards the arch gateway, Bakugu was nearly off the campus property. A dense forest loomed outside the gates, as well as the road to home. Cars zoomed by on it. You looked at Midoriya. He stood up and caught his breath, chest rising and falling less rapidly. His heart began to settle down, and he could breathe properly again. Midoriya gave you pleading eyes. You sighed and nodded your head. Sure. Putting your headphones over your ears, you began to play music and headed back towards the classroom. However, even with your music blasting, you could hear the sound of Bakugo screaming.